మళ్ళీ రావాలా? ఏమైంది?
I have a 5-minute call.
Madhu, Anurag, can we start?
Yeah, sure. You want to start then, Sujit?
Yeah, I will start, right? Good afternoon, everyone. And we are very happy and very proud to say that we are collaborating with Hyderabad IC Squared chapter, right? And this is, we've partnered in the past, and this is the first time we are doing a live program together. So the chosen topic for today and for next weekend is going to be on cloud certification offered from IC Squared. So to walk us through the contents and also the area, what we need to prepare and how to prepare, it will be Anurag from the Hyderabad chapter. So I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone, and very especially the leadership team of Hyderabad chapter. I also want to remember and recognize at this point in time our industry partners, FITIS and SLASCOM. Thank you for your support. Thank you for continuing to support the profession and, helping bridge the cybersecurity gap both in the region and the world. So with that note, I just would like to introduce Madhu, President, Hyderabad chapter, to say a few words. And Madhu, over to you.
Well, thank you, Sujit, and sorry for the background noise. I'm outside, unavoidable situation for me. Hopefully, I'm audible and clear, at least. So, thank you for giving me the opportunity, me meaning the Hyderabad chapter itself. It's fledgling. It's probably little more than a year old, and we are learning a lot from Sri Lanka chapter. And Sujit, you are our mentor. So, in this journey, this is our second endeavor in collaboration, conducting an event. And thank you for providing all the advice and guidance in last 6 months or so. And we have a long way to go to catch up with the Sri Lanka chapter. So we are officially competing with Sri Lanka chapter. Try to reach there at some point in time in future, near future. So take me a minute. Anurag is, incidentally, we both work for the same organization, and he leads information security and controls function for the infrastructure organization, and very passionate. And he recently completed the CCSP certification, and you will see him, the excitement in his tone when he walks all of you through the program. So without further ado, thank you. Anurag, over to you. Maybe a brief introduction about yourself. And Sujit, thanks again.
You're welcome, Madhu. Thank you for being with us today, in spite of your busy schedule. So we appreciate your contribution, your partnership, and I look forward to a very strong, competitive, constructive partnership. Madhu, all the best. Anurag, over to you. So I will let you drive the session. You can decide how you want to run this, the breaks, how you want to invoke discussions. It's all yours.
Great. Thanks, Sujit. Thank you, Madhu, for joining in. I know it's busy for you, and thank you, both of you, for this platform and the opportunity to get together and talk about cloud and CCSP. I'm sure everybody in this call today is somehow related to information security at large, or is either working or is interested to pursue further more expertise and skill sets when it comes to cloud and cloud security. So a brief about me, I'm essentially from the very beginning of my career have been in the field of information security, risk and compliance, about close to 18 years into this area. Member of the Hyderabad chapter and looking forward to contribute more actively as it grows further. Essentially, I have been working in financial and health sciences for the most of my career. Before this, I was before Novartis, I was working in the consulting space, so have served many financial service industry clients, and now in the life sciences space. I have been an ISC squared member. I did my CISSP before this back in 2009. And recently I finished my CCSP. So I'm very excited about the accomplishment, as well as wanted to pay it forward with others in the community. And that's how we kind of had this idea of putting together this program. We'll talk more about the rest of the agenda and everything. Apart from my profession, I'm a hobbyist DJ. I also DJ occasionally within Hyderabad. So if any of you are interested in catching me up there in a different setting, do follow me on Instagram. It's DJ Clavester is my stage name there. And I'm looking forward to more active discussion as we go along today and the next weekend, as part of this agenda. So what we have here is essentially how we've laid it out. We currently, it's a two-part session today, which is 13th May, and then next Saturday again, we've broken it up into two parts. We will cover the first half of the session more about knowing, obviously the introductions, and then we'll also have a short poll that we'll have soon now to know more about the audience that is there attending here. We'll give an overview of the certification in terms of what CCSP really is, why it is important, how it is structured, etc. And once we've got that context, we'll then dive into the different domains of CCSP certification. Obviously, it's a lot to cover, and I don't think this is going to be in any way replacing the amount of preparation or study you have to do at your end. We have limited time, but the idea is not to really do a study session. It's not a boot camp. It's more about giving an overview, an outline of what the common body of knowledge or CBK or CCSP is, and get a flair of it as you start getting further into it and start pursuing it in a much more planned way. So we'll talk more about it as well. We'll have breaks in between. It's a 3-hour session. So I think just to make sure everybody's charged and fresh and attentive, we'll have breaks in between. The next break coming up at 2 o'clock. We'll have a 15 minutes break, and then again at 2:45, the next break. All right. So I will move to, as I was saying, a bit of some, I would say, boundaries or guardrails around this program itself. So this is a mentorship program, not a boot camp. As I said, it's not in any way expected that after this session you can go and book your CCSP and clear it. So don't take that as an objective here. It's more about getting some direction and overview. What is it about? How much of the breadth it covers? And it's also more about, I know there are a lot of people in this discussion today who are more experienced than I am, and everybody else here who have worked in this space for long. So would really want to keep it more conversational. If you have any input, stories, feedback that would be relevant to the wider audience, just feel free to chime in. I am not calling myself as a speaker here. I'm more of a facilitator. So it'll be really great to see participation from rest of the audience here to bring their perspectives, experiences, and knowledge to the broader forum. And lastly, as I said, it's broken into two halves. We'll have short breaks, and that's, I've already given you the overview of the agenda as such. So I tried to do this, hope it works. It's a quick poll. If you are in front of your system or on phone, you can probably do this QR here. This will let you log into a poll right now. I'm also logging into the backend. So try to log in. It might be restricted. I don't know how many audience or size is here, but it might be restricted to 25 only. But anyway, that will be a good way to get started. So I'll give you a moment to reach there, and then I will start asking some of the questions which will help us basically know what the composition of this group is, why are you here, what's on your mind, so kind of we anchor ourselves accordingly, right? So I could see responses coming in already. That's great. Let me try it as well. Okay, so yeah, so the first one I think everybody is saying so far is intermediate. Is anybody having challenge logging in, or are people still able to go into it? Sujit, are you able to be there on this poll?
I am not attempted to do the poll, but
Okay,
I
no
think
worries.
it works. It's working.
Yeah, I am seeing some responses coming. So
Yes. And then we have a good amount of audience. People are still joining in.
yeah, okay. So let me see where it is as well. All right, so this is what the poll looks. All right, so I will move. I think majority consider themselves as intermediate. It's good. And the next one would be, what is your role? What would you best describe your role as? Let me start making it activate and see if it moves. Oh, there's so many windows here. Okay. So would your role be more of a security consultant? Are you working more within the organization and the office of the CISO information security? Are you from the vendor side? Are you cloud service provider side, or you do something really much more fancier than these, right? So a large population, or rather everybody who has responded, I don't know how many of you have, but are in the consulting side of things. That's good to know. So why I'm attending this program? So I may consider, are you sitting at the fence to consider CCSP? You're already actively pursuing CCSP, or you're really yet to make up your mind about CCSP? So a lot of them, majority say you are or you would. It's changing. So you may consider CCSP down the road. So hopefully this session makes you more prepared as you get into a formal preparation. That's good. Thank you. And one of the last questions is about, do you have previous IC square certification, or are you already a member of the IC squared body, and hopefully one of the chapters as well? It's 50-50 breakup there. All right, so majority have an IC square certifications. So that's great. Good, thank you. I think this helps get some broad understanding of the people out here. Thank you for participating. I'll push back into the presentation here, and we will get started back here. All right. So I think now we are getting into a bit of the CCSP overview, the why and what of CCSP. So CCSP essentially is more of a fundamental cloud and cloud security concepts related certification program. So what I mean by that is, one, it is vendor neutral. It doesn't really give you a product vendor specific training. And the reason why that is helpful is because as things are evolving in the cloud front so rapidly, CCSP as a certification helps you get the basics and the fundamentals right. So no matter how much cloud evolves, I think some of the concepts and some of the characteristics that the CCSP explains in terms of in terms of cloud will be evergreen, because those are the fundamentals based on which the cloud has evolved. So one of the characteristic or two characteristics I would really call out what CCSP is essentially based on is that it's based on the fundamentals, the basics of cloud and cloud security. And two, being vendor neutral, it is essentially going to be, no matter whether you're working in AWS, Azure, or Google, or any other platform, Salesforce, for example, the basics will always be the same. And that's essentially why CCSP is also one of the most respected and most popular certification program when it comes to cloud security today. To qualify for the CCSP, you must pass the exam and I have at least 5 years of cumulative experience, of which 3 years must be in information security. So if you have been in the field of information security, I think with even if 3 years of experience, I'm sure you would be working in one of the 6 domains of ISC square anyway. So I think that should not be a problem. But for any reason, if you don't have the required experience, you then go with the associate of ISC square approach. You can still clear your CCSP as an associate of ISC square. And then you will have 6 years to earn the necessary experience before you can call yourself a CCSP. So ISC square doesn't really stop you from appearing the exam, preparing for it, and clearing it if you want to do it ahead in your career. But eventually you would need to have the necessary experience to then get the certification endorsed with your name. So you would remain an associate of ISC square until then. In my view, when I went through it, those of you who have already done CISSP as part of ISC square certification, a lot of CCSP is essentially a subset of the CISSP curriculum with a cloud context to it. So when we go through it in more detail in rest of the domains, you will realize if you have done CSSP before, it's pretty much, now I'm talking CSSP from 2009 days, so I know a lot has changed over time, but since I did CCSP after such a big gap in my ISC square certification journey, I realize a lot of it is reiterating concepts of security fundamentals, the concept of security operation fundamentals, so on and so forth, but with a cloud context. So it's essentially a wrapper to the much bigger CSSP in my view. And then we can, I hope that will resonate with most of you as you go further and look into the domains that I'm going to walk you through. I think CCSP is pretty much applicable to anybody and everybody who is in this field of information security, because cloud is pretty much omnipresent everywhere. It's no longer a new fancy thing. I think every organization in one way or the other is dealing with cloud and cloud security. So either you're an architect, an administrator, a consultant on the managerial front, you will be always dealing with cloud and cloud security topics. So, and I think that's the reason why many of you are here, because you must be playing one or the other role in your organization or at your clients, for which CCSP would be very relevant. This is some of the things I got from other sources, essentially from ISC itself. It was first introduced in 2015. Um, and I think today, based on my just Google, I would say there are about approximately, there were 11,000 CCSPs as of 1st Jan 2021. That is what the ISC squared published numbers were. I think approximately today there would be about 15,000 globally. So it is still a niche certification, the most popular one as well. I would say this CCSP certification has been called out and has been recognized by various bodies, by various platforms. It's one of the top most resonating cloud certification out there today. And I don't think anybody else, any other certification gets so close to CCSP. I don't think I need to say that as much. It is pretty evident because we all are in that field and domain of information security. What are the benefits? Why would you prefer to do this? I think everybody will have or would relate to one or the other reason that is listed here. Depending on what phase of career you are at, what your professional goals are, you may want to pursue CCSP for one of the reasons mentioned here. It could be for career advancement if you are starting off in the field of cloud security or security in general. It gives you versatility because, as I said, it's a vendor neutral certification. So having a CCSP gets you versatile across various cloud vendor and platforms because the concepts and the fundamentals remain the same. Respect, I guess, yes, it is something that you would flaunt, put on your resume, put on your profile. It comes with some weight, right? So a solid foundation. It's fundamental. It's CCSP doesn't get into too much of technicalities, too much of complexities in terms of the course itself. It is still foundational. It's fundamental. It talks to you about the basics, really. And we'll go through it, and you'll probably realize what I mean by that. It's a community of professionals. It creates a community of professionals around you. You are able to associate. If you are not an ISC Square member, having CCSP will get you become an ISC Square member, and that opens up much more avenues of resources that you could leverage, professional network, so on and so forth. Salaries, probably it's never enough, but I guess you can have an argument that this does add value to your overall experience. Expanded knowledge base and stronger skill set. So the reason I did, it's more about for me to get grounded and baselined on the cloud fundamentals, because there's so much you hear and come across in the context of cloud in your day-to-day work that sometimes it becomes very blurry what exactly is the right thing to do. And when you go through a certification program like CCSP, it clears the air. It gets you the clarity in terms of the basics, the fundamentals of cloud security, on top of which you can then relate to the situation at hand. So I did it more because cloud is the in thing. Probably nowadays it's more about the whole large language models and generative AI and all that, but cloud will remain the engine behind many of the newer technologies and innovation that are going to happen in the industry at large. And I never had something to really say that I have the confidence, or I would say I had the clarity of thought when it comes to cloud, right? I've been working in the space of cloud for a long time, but never had a reference framework in my head to say this is the right thing when it comes to cloud security, and everything else is either noise or it is something that adds on to the basic fundamentals. So yeah, I mean, you can find your reason here, and I hope those of the 50% odd who responded to the poll that they would pursue CCSP sometime down the road would find value as we go through this curriculum in a bit more detail. And if you have any questions that you would want to understand based on my experience of going through CCSP and the exam that I gave, I'm happy to share here or even after we have these sessions done. Curriculum changed last year, effective August 1st. I did my CCSP January of this year. So I was with the new curriculum. Not a lot has changed though. There are 6 domains. They made certain adjustments in terms of the naming of certain concepts and stuff like that, but not a major change in what was there earlier and what has come as a change starting August. The main takeaway from here is that if you look at the breakup of the 6 domains, everything more or less is the same weightage, except a slight stress on cloud data security amongst all the other domains. And I think the reason for that is, at the end of the day, the data is the core which you need to focus on when you're trying to build security in cloud. Without data, I think nothing makes sense. So cloud data security is the most or the highest rated domain when it comes to the number of questions that will be given to you as part of your exam. But again, it's just it's largely just 3% more than the majority of the other domains. So all the domains are equally important. It's just that cloud data security stands out amongst the rest. So feel free to ask questions if you have any. I can't see the chat or if there are any hands raised, but if there are, please do unmute and stop me if you have any questions, right?
Nothing right now, Anurag. So I hope once you get into the depth of the subject, there will be questions. So I'm monitoring it. So if there's anything, I will bring it up for you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Sujit. Yeah. Okay. And then continuing on the exam itself, the length of the exam is 4 hours. Exam fees is about $600. There are 150 questions, which essentially means, if you do the math, it's about less than 2 minutes to answer each question. So that is, I mean, it sounds like a lot of time to do 150 questions, but the challenge is when you get to do the questions, those who have given CSSP or something similar in ISC would know, you start double guessing yourself, because you can always rule out 2 out of the 4 choices, but you will be stuck with 2 choices, which will then keep double guessing. I mean, you will keep double guessing. So the strategy to the exam is that you stop doing that and you go through all the 150 questions, because if I'm not wrong, because I vaguely remember when I did this, there was an instruction in the beginning that you need to finish answering all the questions to qualify to be marked whether you passed or failed, right? So even if you did a good chunk of 150 questions, saying you pretty much got through the passing score and you left it in between, or you were not able to finish it, you are still not qualified for the marking to happen. So you need to finish the 150th question, and that's why it is very important to time yourself and keep the right pace. Question format or multiple choice, 70% is the passing mark. And yeah, Pearson VUE is the proctor for where you can get this registered from. Yeah, I think before we get into domain, this is something I wanted. These are my rough notes, which I made just so that it helps the larger audience as they prepare for it. No guarantees it worked for me. It may not, but I still thought I'll put it out. As you prepare for CCSP, prepare a schedule and stick to it. I think that's very important, because I'm sure everybody of us is working, and you need to prepare a way or a schedule, how much time you can devote to preparing for it over a period of a couple of months. I took about 4 months at a steady pace. It may work sooner, or you may need more time, depending on how much time and how quickly you're able to grasp things. The materials that I referred were the official CCSP CBK. It's something that is available online. If you're an ISC member, you get a discount as well. And the other main source of uh, uh, material for me was the official practice tests. I think in my preparation, the more you practice the questions, the better you get to the to understanding the concepts. Just doing the CBK, which is the official common body of knowledge from ISC square, is not enough. It doesn't cover everything and anything that you would get a question on. There is a lot more beyond it, and they give you a lot of references to go and study, go and study OWASP, go and study CSA, look into NIST or ISO. They'll keep giving you references and they expect you to go and read them. There is no end to it. So the more questions you do, the more chances that you would come across those topics that you haven't studied in CBK, and therefore you can go and look them up and prepare better. That's why I say the more practice questions you do, the better it will be from a preparation standpoint. The other good thing is CCSP, ISC Square actually has an official study app for smartphones. So if you go online and you look for it, you can actually download from from your Play Store or Apple Store. It's a very convenient way of preparing and doing questions. They are the same questions that I talked about in the practice tests, but it's just more convenient when you're traveling or when you have a spare time. You can open it up and just start preparing for it. As I said, a lot of Google, a lot of YouTube, not everything is available in the books. So you need to do a lot of that Googling and YouTubing on some of the topics that the CBK will not dive into in detail. And those you will know when you do the questions that, okay, this is something that I need to learn more about. One of the other things when we do CCSP is to think like a manager concept. So it's a similar one to CISSP, I guess, where you have these questions where you might start thinking like a techie and think about what the right technical solution to it is. But that's probably right in your opinion, but may not be right from an ISC square point of view. So it may be a wrong answer. So think like a manager, things like, health and human safety trumps everything else. So in a data center related situation, when you're saying, okay, what is the most important consideration to when you're designing a data center? Is it the network redundancy, or is it to do with the HVAC system, or is it to do with the elevation of the flooring? And there'll be a question about ensuring that there is enough exit options from the data center for the people working in the data center. I think that is the better option than everything else, right? So when you do those questions, you will get that mindset in how ISC wants to think or wants you to think. And that's important. I think those who have done CISSP before would relate to what I'm trying to say. It's the technical choice may not be the best choice at all times. I already talked about CISSP. Most of the CSP is nothing but CISSP concepts with a cloud wrapper. If you have done CISSP before, I think CCSP would be really a breeze, if you've done it recently. So that's one thing which I felt. Yeah, and lastly, but not the least, be fresh and positive during the exam day, especially if you have a very strict proctor at the venue, because this was why, when I went to Pearson VUE, it was probably one of the most, I would say, scariest experience, because I've never been frisked, checked, told so many rules of what you can do, not do. You cannot take water inside. You cannot do this, that. Like, you were already tense. On top of it, you will get even more tensed. So be cool. Just because at the end of the day, those 4 hours is what matters when you sit for the exam. And the more you are able to treat your mind and be cool that day, the better it is. So yeah, so be positive and be fresh on the exam day. There's a lot of resources. I do actually have these as hyperlinks here, but there's a lot of resources that ISC itself provides for CCSP aspirants. There's a study group you can join. There is a CCSP common body of knowledge that I talked about. There are training partners. There is you have links to the certification testing where you can go and enroll. There are self-study resources, which I talked about some of them, the app and everything else. There are many references. So entire CBK makes references to so many other sources. Like I talked about the Cloud Security Alliance, the NIST, the OWASP, and there are many other standards, ISO standards, everything. So there is a list of those references at one place for you as well. There is a overall exam outline, and so on and so forth. I mean, there are so much there. If you just go to ISC Square web page and try and research on CCSP, you will get to see all these resources available to you. All right. So with that all said, which is all about CCSP and the exam structure and everything, I think now we will get into the domain, the domains itself, and the first domain being architectural concepts and design requirements. This is the first domain. This is the foundational domain where the information that are provided here in terms of the cloud computing concepts, the models, what are different cloud service models, deployment models, is really where you would start understanding what cloud really is. I mean, the definition of cloud itself is introduced in this particular domain, because although we talk cloud so much, what exactly is a cloud? How do you define it? Is something that you realize as you get into this domain. So as I was saying, what is a cloud? What is cloud computing is one thing that would be defined as part of this this particular domain. What are the different cloud computing roles? What are the key characteristics of a cloud? And what are the building block technologies? So we'll talk more about it, all of these in brief. But as you could imagine, we are just starting with the concepts and fundamentals of cloud itself. Cloud computing definitions, when we get into that area, there would be introduction to different service models, which is also the, all that we know about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, the various deployment models, which are more about what is public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, community cloud. So all those get covered as part of the cloud computing definitions. So here is the definition of cloud, and it's very much, before I get into the definition, actually, let me just say, if I ask somebody on a cloud to define what a cloud is in a layman term, this is how potentially one would say, right? A simpler way to describe cloud is it takes a set of resources, such as the different processors or memory, or basically all the computing resources, and put them into a big pool. And the next step is a consumer asks for what they need. They would ask for a specific resource in a specific quantity. And the cloud assigns those resources to the client, who then connects to uses them over a network. And when the work is done, they release the resources back into the pool for somebody else to use. That is how, basically, at a very fundamental level, how cloud works, right? And when we make it into a formal definition, I mean, NIST describes it in this way. It says, cloud is a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access. So you might have to stress and understand and pause after each word that is mentioned in the NIST definition, because those are the key characteristics of a cloud. And why cloud is different from typical virtualization that we've been doing for ages is probably coming out through this definition. So starting again, cloud is a model for enabling ubiquitous, so which basically means it's available everywhere. It's convenient. It's not a hassle to access cloud. It's on demand, basically, which means it's not always on, or you use and you pay for what you use. It's on demand. It's over the network to a shared pool of configurable computing resources that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort or service provider interaction. So one of the things also explained there is if you have to raise tickets to another third party, provision a server to you, then probably it's not cloud because that's more like a managed service. If you're using a virtualization concept, just virtualization, running a virtual VMs in your environment, but you don't have the other characteristics of on-demand use, rapid provisioning, self-service, then it's not cloud. So it's important that when we go through the cloud definition, it's very much important we understand the words that are mentioned in the NIST definition, and then the rest of this domain actually expands on many of these topics in more detail, but the genesis is from this definition that comes from NIST itself. The NIST guideline 500-292 gives the reference architecture for cloud. We will see about it in a minute. And then the definition of cloud is given in 800-145. So those are some of the references you should know as part of the preparation as well. And if possible, you should even go through these NIST guidelines or NIST references, to glance through them, because there are questions that I have seen come from these guidelines as well. ISO defines a very similar definition. You would see it resonates very much with NIST. It just has reworded or rephrased some of the same concepts. Paradigm for enabling network access to a scalable and elastic pool of shareable physical or virtual resources with self-service provisioning and administration on demand. So self-service, on-demand access, accessed over the network, scalable and elasticity, pool of shared resources. All these are just resonating on both sides, whether it's NIST or ISO. So this, excuse me, this view here would give an overview of what really, I mean, all the cloud computing concepts come together into this one view. So I thought this was a good representation to put here. So one of the essential characteristics which we just spoke about coming from the definition of the cloud itself, you have broad network access, which is essentially what it means is if you have access to internet, you should be able to access cloud. The rapid elasticity is what we will talk about more, but it's more about how the resources can scale out or scale up as needed within the cloud. So scale out would mean that you would, if the demand is more to the cloud from a particular tenant or a bunch of tenants, the cloud should be able to support that demand by adding more or increasing more computing power, by adding more instances, by adding more VMs to the or the resources to that structure that serves that particular tenant. Scale up is that you just throttle up or increase the performance of the same computing resource that has been allocated. So scale out or scale up, that is the rapid elasticity. Measured service, because you use cloud and it goes hand in hand with on-demand self-service. So you only pay for what you use, and for that you need to know how much you used. So measurable service or measured service are one of the characteristics of cloud. On-demand self-service is another aspect, we talked about it. And at the end of the day, resource pooling is the fundamental characteristic of cloud as well, because without resource pooling, you won't be able to work or meet the requirements of the other characteristics out there. Below that, you would see service models. I think this is not something that would be new to all of us. Infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. We'll talk about it more and what it means to the shared responsibility model to the cloud service provider and to the cloud customer. We then also talk about the various deployment models. There is a public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, and community cloud. So we'll go into it a bit more going forward. One of the things that is important to also know is, you see questions on it coming in, is like, where would SaaS fit in more versus PaaS versus IaaS, right? So if you are an end user, you just are a consumer of the data or process data, I think SaaS is what you would prefer, right? If so, basically, if you put those um, how would you call the profile of a user who is trying to use cloud, if that profile characteristics say, I don't care about the backend, I just need to work with data, SaaS is what would be the better choice for you, because you just don't get involved in anything else beyond that. PaaS is more for, excuse me. So PaaS would be platform as a service, is more for would be more for developers, right? Because um, the developers would want to have a ready to use a VM with their operating system loaded, so that they can start building software on top of it. So if you are the developer persona, and if you're looking for cloud, if your company is into, let's say, software development, and you're trying to go to cloud, I think your preferred choice would be using a platform as a service model, because you don't want your people to spend time in managing the infrastructure. You want people to spend time building and developing applications and software. The other persona is more of system administrators. So if you are system administrators, you don't want to be bothered with the cabling, racking, and procuring hardware. You want to have that readily available as a service. All you want to do is to install the operating system, configure, harden it, everything else. So that is the persona who would prefer to go with infrastructure as a service. So this is important to know, because it's mentioned in the CCSP as well, like what persona would prefer what type of cloud service model. I would probably not go through a lot of these concepts in detail, but I'll just brush it up, because I think everybody would mostly in this call understand these fundamentals of the different service models. Essentially, if you're on premise, if you're moving to infrastructure as a service, what you see there in the slide, the bottom yellow ones are the ones that are managed by the vendor in the infrastructure as a service, and everything above, including the OS, is what comes under the control of the customer. So as infrastructure as a service, I think the benefits would always be less CapEx involvement, because you're not spending money buying those hardware that is needed to run your operations. Quick deployment and pay for what you use. And the cloud provider is responsible ensuring the maintenance of all the hardware and virtualized services. Most of these benefits would go and just get further enhanced as you go up the different service models, where if you go from infrastructure to platform to software as a service. So that is a constant theme you would see in each of the service models. So platform as a service, the responsibility of the vendor or the cloud vendor ends at the middleware, middleware layer, I would say, where you would have your operating system ready. You would have any other platforms that you're using in place. All you need to do is to be able to start building your applications and managing the data that will be processed by those applications. For platform as a service, again, no or very less CapEx involved. Quickly deploy applications using provider tools. So as I said before, more for developers, coders, to be able to use such PaaS benefits and not be bothered about the underlying infrastructure. So it's, as you see, it's more focused towards the developer community who want to build applications and deal with that much only. Software as a service, I know in this diagram, because I took it from a reference, but I would say the data is still, at the end of the day, the data in this view that you see is managed by the vendor. So the data and the applications are also managed by the vendor, because the data will be stored somewhere in the cloud that you are putting into the service. But at the end of the day, the data accountability will still lie with the customer. So data is one thing, no matter which service model you choose will always be the accountability of the customer, right? So it's the customer's accountability to make sure that whatever service they are using, they are comfortable and they are assured that the data will not be misused, um, will not be, or would be compliant with all the required laws and regulations um, that the customer has to adhere to. And on the other extreme, the physical hardware data centers or the physical hardware that is involved will always be the responsibility of the cloud service provider, because in any model that you choose, IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS, the infrastructure layer, the physical infrastructure will always remain with the cloud service provider. So I will skip. This is a very good representation I wanted to keep here, which was translating everything into a pizza as a service. So if you want to do everything on your own, you get everything and deal with it, which is made at home. The next one is infrastructure as a service. You get the infrastructure, the pizza, the tomato sauce, the toppings or whatever from the vendor, but you then do everything at home to create the pizza itself. The platform as a service is where the pizza is delivered to your home, but then you have to unpack it, sit on your dining table and eat it eventually. And SaaS is where you just go out, order the pizza that you need, pay for it, and come back. It's essentially a very good representation. So I thought I'll keep it here. Okay. Let me then move to the fundamentals of what is the different deployment models. So the first one is public cloud, where the cloud resources are owned and operated by a third party and delivered over the internet. So the public cloud are one of the more common ones we've seen are the Azure and AWS. So they are examples of public cloud. All the hardware, software, and other supporting infrastructure is owned and managed by the cloud provider. So again, one of the characteristics of public cloud, which is very important to know, is that you share the same hardware, storage, and network with other organizations or cloud tenants. So that's a benefit, as well as an area for security risk that one has to evaluate when they try to move to public cloud. Because at the end of the day, even if you're using a virtual private cloud on a public cloud provider setup or a VPC on an Amazon VPC, at the end of the day, your hardware layer below the virtualization layer will always be shared. Now, there are concepts of dedicated hosts, which also gives you a dedicated server in a way, the hardware to a particular tenant. But then even below that, the physical premise where it is hosted, the cabling, the racking, the people who are working on it are shared. So there will always be a shared layer when it comes to public cloud. So public cloud benefits would be no need to purchase hardware or software, and you pay only for the service you used. I think this would be common for many other cloud models as well, but let's talk about public cloud. There will be lower cost in general. There'll be no maintenance. Your service provider will provide the maintenance for that layer. And it's near unlimited scalability. So on-demand resources are available to meet your business needs and high reliability, because public cloud like AWS and Google's of the world would have a huge capacity to meet the needs of their tenants. I mean, they would have the resources, they are spread across globally, they have multiple regions, multiple availability zones. So it's almost near unlimited scalability and high reliability, because you are basically leveraging the capacity that you have available globally and managing that capacity in the most efficient way to meet the needs of the tenants that are taking service from you. Versus if you're trying to set up your own private cloud or a community cloud where that benefit is limited with how much you can invest, right? So public cloud this is a good call out to say that while they are unlimited in the scalability that they provide, or they are highly reliable because they have so much there's so much option to leverage in terms of capacity and managing it. But that's also a downside. As we go into it further, we realize that how having data spread across multiple regions in the name of high reliability um, can be a downside because of the requirements of data localization, data disposal, etc., because you don't have then control on where the data will be eventually residing unless you configure it that way or you ask the service to provide it in a certain way. But by the default nature of it, it's both a benefit and there's a downside to it. Private cloud is consists of computing resources used exclusively by one business or organization. It can be located at your own data center, or it can be hosted by a third-party service provider. So at the end of the day, private cloud, whether it's at your own premise or or hosted by a third-party service provider, it will always be dedicated to that one particular business or organization that is taking the service from it. It also includes, as I said, in the public cloud space, there will always be a shared layer, whether it's at the physical data center itself or at the hardware, IT hardware that is running the public cloud service. In private cloud, you would have that dedicated solely for your organization. Typically, it's used by the government agencies or highly risky organizations like financial institutions, which have business critical operations, or they deal with very sensitive information that they do not want any chance of multi-tenancy to be. So basically, if you have, if your risk appetite is so low that you cannot afford a public cloud model because you are uncomfortable with the shared control, you would then probably choose a private cloud. But I think in my view, with so much happening or so many different services or configurable services that you get in the public cloud space as well, the lines are really blurred. I think it's more about, at times, it also gets down to the financials. So when you move to a cloud, typically you would do a business case analysis on the benefits of moving to cloud. Apart from, most of the times, I would say it's not the security, it's the overall financial business case of what makes more sense, whether you want to convert your existing on-prem to a private cloud, or you want to go through a multi-year journey of moving things from your on-prem and either lifting and shifting them or repurposing them to move to a public cloud, and then paying for that public cloud based on a per usage model. So it is more than security that defines what kind of cloud model you would want to prefer for your organization. I think we are just about at the hour where we would want to take a few minutes break. If I think if there are no questions, I would rather just give ourselves 15 minutes before we continue further, before everybody checks out. So I think if any questions, anything out there before we take a pause right now? All right, so I think we will reconvene in about 15 minutes. So if you want to take a quick bio break, freshen up, and I think we can get back at about 2:15 IST. I'll just stop sharing and then we'll get back. Thank you all for joining so far.